Okay, good evening. Today we are moving on with our planning chapter, business analysis planning. We were on the topic 3.4.5 and here we were talking about the how to ensure the team is trained on the project lifecycle. We have already discussed that we have to select a project lifecycle, whether it is given to us by the organization or we have selected one for ourselves. But whatever the project lifecycle is, project team has to be properly understanding what they are going to be doing according to that life cycle. What is that life cycle? How is it going to deliver its phases and all? So this is what we require from our project team. Project teams and key stakeholders may require training if they have not worked previously with a selected project life cycle. If the project life cycle is a standard in your organization and the same life cycle you are using and people are already trained on it, your stakeholders and your project team members, then they do not need any further training. You can straight away get with the business. But if this is a new life cycle or the people who are involved are new to it, then in that case, you have to make them aware of what this life cycle is. Moreover, they might need some training. The business analyst should be aware of the experience levels of the different stakeholders and identify areas where coaching or training may be needed to be provided to assist the stakeholders through the requirement activities. So, if they are well aware of how this project is going to turn over, then they will be able to contribute better. Because templates and business analysis deliverables vary based on the project lifecycle, time should be provided to update stakeholders who have the responsibility of reviewing, prioritizing, and validating requirements. In addition, the business analyst lead may manage a team of business analysts should ensure that the business analysts have the necessary skills to use the technique and tools selected for the work. So here we find that the business analyst has a responsibility to interface or collaborate with the stakeholders, keep them engaged in the business analysis process, and the project manager also is responsible for stakeholder engagement across the project. So that is a point where both of them have to interact with the stakeholder and therefore they have to coordinate and communicate with each other in that regard. So there is an opportunity for the roles to work together to determine the readiness and willingness of key stakeholders to participate in the project activities. In nutshell, we are preparing our stakeholders. We are making them ready according to this project life cycle to contribute to the project, and definitely this is a collaboration point between the business analyst as well as the project manager, and business analyst and the stakeholder, project manager and the stakeholder. So this is a kind of a triangle. Retrospectives in adaptive life cycle projects. I hope you understand in adaptive life cycles, whenever we complete an iteration or we complete the whole project or a major accomplishment is made, we look back and review our work. That is called retrospect. So retrospectives are meetings that are scheduled on a regular basis or conducted when a body of work is completed, such as the conclusion of an iteration or at the end of the project phase. Retrospectives have been used for many years in the development process of Kanban. I hope you understand what Kanban means. It is very closely related with agile approaches, but it is basically a lean system. Kanban is a lean methodology. So Kanban works in collaboration with agile approaches as well. Scrum and extreme programming, they utilize it, and in lean methods such as Kaizen and continuous improvement, the purpose of retrospectives is to task the project team with identifying those areas where team performance can be improved. So why are we looking backwards? Why are we reviewing our progress, whether it is the progress of a iteration, of a phase, or of the whole project? That is, we want to learn lessons out of it and we want to improve. That is what is the purpose of the retrospectives. Team reflects on their success. Okay, so I think before we were disconnected, I was discussing about the to ensure the team is trained on the project lifecycle. So I was discussing that project team and the project stakeholders, they have to be on the same line, because we already know what kind of project life cycle we are going to follow. Sometimes it is standardized in the organization. So if it is standardized and your team and your stakeholders already know about the project life cycle, then probably they don't have to be trained for that. But if you are using a new life cycle, or your team members are new, or your key stakeholders do not know how to work with that project life cycle, in that case you have to provide, as a business analyst, you have to provide them some guidance, some training. Lot of reports and returns, the requirement collection process will be greatly affected by the project life cycle. So business analysts should be aware of the experience levels of the stakeholders and identify areas where coaching or training may need to be provided to assist the stakeholder through the requirement activities. Because templates and business analysis deliverables vary based on the project life cycle, time should be provided to update stakeholders who have the responsibility of reviewing, prioritizing, and validating requirements. In addition, business analyst lead who manages a team of business analysts should ensure that the business analysts have the necessary skills to use the techniques and tools selected for the work. As far as the collaboration point is concerned, you see there is a multiple collaboration here. The business analyst has to collaborate with the stakeholders to keep them engaged. Project manager also have to do the same from the project perspective. Business analyst is doing that from the product perspective, and project manager is doing that from the project perspective. And because they both are doing almost a similar kind of job, therefore there is a need for collaboration amongst the business analyst and the project manager for this job. So this is a three-way kind of a communication. Business analyst communicates and coordinates and collaborates with the stakeholder. Project manager collaborates and communicates with the stakeholder, and business analyst and project manager collaborate as if there is no dual effort. They must use it as an opportunity for the roles to work together to determine the readiness and willingness of the key stakeholders to participate in the project objectives. Then are the leverage past experiences when planning. So whatever we have learned, the lessons learned earlier, they must be used here. And whatever we will learn lessons from this current project or business analysis exercise, we must leave lessons learned for the future projects. Lessons learned is the knowledge gained during our project, which shows how project events were addressed or should be addressed for the purpose of improving future performance. Lessons learned process is a best practice used by project teams to discuss, analyze, and document feedback about completed project activities. So in defense forces, they used to call it debriefing. So in debriefing, they present what has happened, what has happened wrong, what has happened right. They discuss it, they analyze it, and they document the feedback for future projects. Lessons learned sessions are typically scheduled after the conclusion of a major phase or completion of a project. These sessions may be held more frequently as a need arises or when major events that require attention occur. So from project management perspective, whenever there is a phase end, whenever there is a iteration end, or whenever there is a project end, there must be a lessons learned exercise. And we have a specific word for that for agile projects, and I will discuss that later. When determining a business analysis approach, the business analyst looks for similarities with other ongoing projects or previous projects that have successful business analysis approach, reviews lessons learned documentation, and applies relevant lessons in whole or in part to the current business analysis process. For example, the business analyst may look through a previous business analysis plan to pull out estimating metrics and find ways in which the estimates can be improved for the current business analysis process. So we can always make use of those lessons learned. Collaboration point here is project managers and business analysts may each conduct their own lessons learned sessions. Project manager obtains feedback on completed project work or the activities, and the business analyst focuses on completed business analysis work. Instead of working independently, the roles should collaborate and facilitate the session together. So now I hope you understand, although a lot many duties or work project manager and business analyst are doing from their own perspective, but because it is about the same project, therefore they must collaborate as if there is no dual effort and no wasted effort for that matter. They should create synergy out of it. So these roles should collaborate and facilitate the session together. Now, as I said, in agile projects, we use the term retrospectives. What is a retrospective? In adaptive lifecycle projects, retrospectives are the meetings that are scheduled on a regular basis or conducted when a body of work is completed, such as conclusion of an iteration, or at the end of every phase, or for that matter, at the end of the whole project. Retrospectives have been used for many years in development process of Kanban and Agile approaches, in Scrum, in extreme programming, even in lean methods such as Kaizen and continuous improvement. So this is not a new term. This has been in vogue and in use for quite some time now. The purpose of retrospective is to task the project team with identifying those areas where team performance can be improved. So this is exactly the lessons learned. We are trying to gather the lessons learned through this retrospective, and this is to improve the future performance. The team reflects on their success and areas for improvement. The facilitator takes responsibility to ensure everyone in the room participates and works together to determine a course of action. Typically, retrospectives use following steps. First of all, set up the stage for the retrospective, for this meeting, for collecting the lessons. The context and tone of the meeting is established. What is the agenda of this team? What is the purpose of this meeting? And in what, in how many stages or phases you want to take this this meeting? What should be discussed? What the agenda points? What are the agenda points? Once you have set the stage, made a program for that, I mean, you have created a schedule for the meeting, then you gather data. And that data could include the factual and relevant data which is pulled together to support the feedback. So whatever is the feedback, coming to you, you can compare it with the actual progress or the relevant data from your project or your business analysis work and compare it. After that, you have related it with the data. You generate insight. The team looks at commonalities in the feedback, including cause and effect. Why there is a negative feedback for that matter? You look at where there was something wrong. That means you have to resort to the cause-effect method. You have to find, you have the effect in front of you, you have to find the cause of it. And that would, coincide with your factual data. You do have the data, so you can travel backwards and see where the problem really occurred. Then you decide what to do. The team collaborates to determine a course of action for improvement, how to improve this situation. Naturally, whatever the iteration or phase has been done is done. We cannot undo it. But for future, how can we improve the situation if the similar problem occurs? So if we are in one iteration, we can apply this knowledge in the forthcoming iterations or forthcoming phases or in forthcoming projects for that matter. Finally, we close the retrospective. That is, the session is concluded. This process is often facilitated with a list of simple questions. What is working? What is not working? What needs to change? So, number one thing is, we review whatever we have done well. We note that this is good exercise and we should keep doing good things. Or if they can be improved, we can think about improving them. What is not working? What have we done which has not produced the desired results? So, if we can identify that, again, point number 3, generate insights, we can do the cause effect and find reason why it did not work out. And ultimately, we could always decide how to put it right. If there is something to be changed, what needs to be changed? Again, through cause and effect, we have found the reason, and that reason has to be eliminated, or something has to change in our plan. So what needs to be changed? That has to be identified. The facilitator, in some cases where we are using Scrum becomes the facilitator, or whomsoever, in whatever methodology you are using for Agile, the facilitator uses charts and other visual methods to capture the information presented. The process is highly collaborative. So it is brainstorming, it is interaction, it is discussion. The biggest difference between lessons learned and retrospectives are in the timing and speed by which issues raised are addressed and the formality around documenting the learnings. Because adaptive life cycles offer more opportunity, retrospectives occur regularly and frequently. You understand this point? In Agile, we have very small iterations, 2 to 4 or 6 weeks iteration. So, as compared to a normal traditional waterfall project, where it will only be lessons learned exercise will only be conducted at the end of phases and at the end of project, we do not have so many opportunities to do this. But when we are dealing with adaptive projects or agile projects, retrospectives are occurring continuously, say after every 2 weeks. And we are continuously putting ourselves right, such as at the end of each sprint or at the end of a Kanban delivery. Retrospectives may also be scheduled on a once a week basis. Irrespective of the delivery, we can always schedule regular retrospective every week. I'm not really saying that the sprint is 1 week. Sprint might be 2, 4 or 6 weeks, but you can make it a rule that we will have a retrospective every week. And by the way, A Scrum meeting is also a kind of a retrospective, although we don't call it a retrospective. That occurs every day. Retrospectives are conducted in a highly collaborative fashion, and decisions made are most often implemented with little formal documentation. So there is least formality. Yes, please. Jadil.
Right. Yeah, yes, sir. So basically, what I understood right now is retrospective is same as of the agile methodologies.
Yes,
And am I right?
agile retrospective is only for agile or adaptive. It is not for waterfall. Waterfall, we use lessons learned.
Okay. So, all right. So, if I relate towards our last discussion, which you have taught me
Mm.
that there are three types of projects cycles. First one is predictive. That is, we say a waterfall type of a model. The other one was the iterative or incremental, and third one was for the adaptive.
Yes,
So this retrospective thing is going to be for the adaptive type model which you are following.
yes, exactly. Retrospective is specifically, this name is used only in adaptive or agile methodologies. Therefore, the third life cycle, the adaptive or agile life cycle, that is the one that uses the term retrospective. Other methodologies may use their own term, but generally we call lessons learned sessions.
All right. So above two are referred to as the lesson learned, and the third one is referred to as the retrospective, right?
Yes. And that is exactly the difference it is shown here in the second paragraph. The biggest difference between lessons learned and retrospective is in the timing and speed. You see, if you are talking about a waterfall model, which has only one phase or say three phases, then we will have the lessons learned exercise only at the end of those three phases and only at the end of the project. So 3 or 4 lessons learned exercise can be done. In case of our iterative life cycle, we may have more because we have iterations, but iterations are not as small as in agile or adaptive life cycles. So in agile, we will have so many opportunities. So the timing is, there's a frequency is too much, and we are doing it with high speed. After every 2 weeks we are doing it. So our speed of retrospective is high.
Okay, I understood this.
Okay. Lessons learned are conducting at the end of stage gates or phase such as project closeout. You see, the necessity for lessons learned still remains, and naturally whatever we get out of these retrospectives is recorded into the lessons learned. But lessons learned are classically for big events like phase ends, stage gates, or the whole project closeout, or when events occur that are worth learning from. So here the frequency is less, but naturally we are doing the same thing. We are trying to learn some lessons for future. Although lessons learned can be conducted more frequently, these are used less frequently than retrospectives and may be driven by the occurrence of an event versus a fixed schedule. So another difference here is that retrospectives may have a fixed schedule, whereas the lessons learned sessions only happen when something has happened, something big has happened, some phase has finished, project has finished, or something big event has happened, a milestone, big milestone has been achieved. Learnings discussed are formally documented and stored in a repository for future reference. That is the lessons learned database. Project teams leverage the lessons learned repository as an input prior to planning work on subsequent projects. So whenever we are doing a new project, we will definitely make use of this lessons learned repository which we have populated from earlier or previous projects. These are the lessons learned we have gathered from previous project, and we will see for any new project if it can use any of these lessons. Due to the frequency by which retrospectives occur, and because they are held multiple times over the course of a single project, improvements can be applied immediately, allowing the value to be gained from the proposed improvement in the next iteration. So if iteration is very small, it is just a 2-week iteration, and I have learned a lesson, I have done my retrospective, I can apply that lesson in the next 2 weeks, as compared to other life cycles where we will not be able to apply this lessons learned until and unless 4, 5 or 6 months have passed. When lessons learned are performed within a predictive life cycle, which was the pure waterfall, the learning can be applied on the same project or the future project. Same project when the next phase of the project is done, and future project when the project has been completed, then we can use this lessons learned only for future. When improvements are proposed on future projects, the project context or characteristics may be different. Therefore, identifying applicable lessons that add value and address performance can prove to be challenging. So if I have got a list of generic lessons learned and I have a new project and I try to apply them, then it will be very difficult to fit the lessons learned of the previous project on the new project, because this project is different, the environment is different, the outlay is different. So although I am not saying we can't apply those lessons learned, but this is slightly difficult. But if I'm trying to use it on the same project and I have done only a little work and I have learned lesson out of it, all the subsequent project I can apply that lessons learned easily and quickly. To ensure that the frequency of retrospectives does not diminish their value, it is important that retrospectives are kept fresh to avoid mundane gatherings where time is not well spent. Team needs to meet often enough. Let me get the next slide. Okay. Are you able to see the next slide starting with due to the frequency?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So due to the frequency by which retrospectives occur and because they are held multiple times over the course of the single project, improvements can be applied immediately, allowing the value to be gained from the proposed improvement in the next iteration. When lessons learned are performed with a predictive life cycle, we talked about it, to ensure that the frequency of retrospectives does not diminish their value, it is important that retrospectives are kept fresh to avoid mundane gatherings where time is not well spent. Team needs to meet often enough to conduct valuable sessions, but not too often that the task is considered a waste of time. Again, time and again we are coming to the same conclusion that we should not go for paralysis through analysis. We should not overdo anything. We should not overcook the dish. Having more retrospectives, higher frequency of retrospectives is good, but please be mindful of the fact that you should not only be doing the retrospective, do some work also. Retrospectives assist in generating ideas to improve team performance, but are not a replacement for training and coaching staff on process. This is a very important point. You cannot keep doing the retrospective excessively in lieu of training and coaching. If there is some training required by the staff, you better provide them the training, you better provide them coaching or provide them guidelines rather than doing retrospective all the time. So you must stop at a limit. Retrospectives and lessons learned data are valuable inputs when formulating an approach for how to conduct the business analysis work for a project. The information gained from both of them can be leveraged to ensure process mistakes are not repeated and that valuable steps are continued. So we have seen that although these two terms, lessons learned and retrospective, look very similar, but they are different due to their frequency and time. And we said retrospectives only occur in agile life cycle or adaptive life cycle. Next is plan for elicitation. Elicitation is collection of data, gathering information for requirements. So plan for elicitation. How do you intend collecting the data from the stakeholders? At this stage of planning, the business analyst should begin to think about how and when to elicit. How and when, that is important. You may have to decide the mechanism you will be using for collecting the data. If you have got a large audience, you can't go and interview each one of them. If you have a very small audience, you cannot float a questionnaire. So you have to decide which techniques to use and what would be the sequence of elicitation activities. How would you do it? What you will do first, what you will do later. So a sequence of activities has to be established. Although it is appropriate to start thinking about technique options in planning, it is not important to prescribe each and every technique that will be used throughout the process. So when you begin, you keep the things slightly open. Don't restrict them by certain techniques that we will use only questionnaire here. Why should you use questionnaire here? You must decide for what type of elicitation, what tool or technique you will be using. That will ultimately be planned. Planning is iterative in nature and much of the information will not be known or uncovered until the elicitation work is underway. So if you are assuming that I know everything already, so you might be wrong because there are a lot many things you will learn over time, and especially when you will be collecting the information, when you will be eliciting the information, that would be the time when you will learn the most. So this will happen during the collection process. When decisions or assumptions impacting the elicitation work are known and worthy of noting, for example, decisions or assumptions that provide clarity or identify the dependencies, the business analyst should note this information. There are a number of factors to consider when planning for elicitation. When you are planning, how you will gather the information. You must understand who all are the stakeholders, how they are classified, what are their group characteristics and dynamics. Then you must know what is the project life cycle we are going to be using in the project. And when you are talking about trying to suggest a technique, you must be very well aware about the characteristics of techniques. There are certain techniques, they are for a certain environment or a certain situation. You can't use other techniques in lieu of them. If speed of use is more important, maybe a specific technique would be preferred. If a particular advantage is to be sought, then maybe a particular technique has to be used. Then you must understand what is the type of the project. Is there any time constraint? What is the budget of this project? Number of stakeholders? Where are the stakeholders located? Types of requirement deliverables being produced and level of detail required in business analysis deliverables. How much information? Techniques that are familiar to the business analyst and key stakeholders involved. So if there are certain techniques which are commonly known and used by the stakeholders as well as by the business analyst, then those techniques are going to be much useful. But naturally, I am not saying that you only should use those techniques which you have been using earlier. You might use a new technique, and if you are using a new technique, then you must train your people, your key stakeholders and your team members in that technique. Planning is iterative, as we said. This slide we have seen. Okay, what are the strategies for sequencing elicitation activities? You will see that this activity is, this process is very similar to sequencing of activities in project management. But here we are only talking about those activities which will be required for collection of data. So in other words, if I say that requirement,
Excuse me, sir.
yes, yes.
So are we missing this slide, the middle one?
3.4.7.1.
Yes, sir.
This,
No, not the previous one, to 7.1. The business analyst should be aware of the elicitation consumes project resources.
okay, okay. I thought we have covered it already. That's why.
No, sir. Yeah, we have just discussed the points, plan of elicitation,
Right, right.
and which were the factors we used to consider.
Okay, okay. Let me cover this first. It says the business analyst should be aware that elicitation consumes project resources. Therefore, there is a cost for each facilitation workshop completed, each interview conducted, and every survey sent. Business analyst balances the need of the project against the quantity of requirement solicitation conducted with the goal of eliciting the right amount to sufficiently define the product solution. Again, naturally, if we understand that when we will be doing the elicitation activities, there will be some time and money which is involved, and that would come out of the project budget. Therefore, we need to outline what all we are ready to do, how much our time and money we are ready to spend for that. So we must also be mindful that in such activities we should not waste a lot of money. But if I waste all the money of the project only in elicitation, I am not left with anything to do when the project starts. So elicitation should be done to the right appropriate level, not more, not less. Most appropriate level, which is sufficient for the product solution. If you feel that you have explored the requirements to a sufficient level which will help you design your project, then you should not go any further. Because again, I would say, if you do that, you are doing paralysis through analysis. Elicitation planning helps to ensure sufficient time is allocated to the elicitation work. So you give appropriate time. You see, we have said in the previous step that we want to do things appropriately, not more, not less. So if you do them in that manner, that sufficient time should be available for doing those appropriate work. It is easy to misjudge the level of effort required. For example, when a survey comprises a part of the elicitation effort, sufficient time needs to be allocated to design, build, administer, and analyze the survey results. It is not only the conduct of the survey that you must be counting as a time for survey, but that survey has to be designed, it has to be built, it has to be physically administered, and after that we have to analyze that survey. Only then it is going to yield any results. When subsequent work is dependent on the survey results, the business analyst should identify and plan for that also. When insufficient time is allocated For elicitation activities, dependent downstream tasks may be delayed when business activities extend past the projected timelines. We developed a timeline. We started working on it for elicitation activities, and some of the elicitation activities took more time. So just like a project, the effect of this delay will be passed on to the subsequent activities. Key stakeholders may find it difficult to allocate additional time to participate in unplanned elicitation sessions when these sessions are planned at the last minute. So, what is the lessons learned? We should try our level best to plan in detail as early as possible. Although I am not stopping, because there are certain cases, certain circumstances where you have to plan suddenly for certain things, then you must make your team members aware that why are we doing this and how are we going to bridge the gap. The need to accommodate additional unexpected workshops begins to have a multiple of impacts to the project schedule. It is best to take a judicious approach to planning upfront, but to ensure enough planning is performed so that dependencies can be identified and relied upon to schedule downstream activities. So ample data has to be available or made available. Okay, now coming over to the strategies for sequencing the elicitation activities. As I was already talking about it, when to start elicitation requirements often poses a challenge. Business analysts know they need to acquire a lot of information. They are constrained by the project timelines. Their stakeholders have a limited number of hours to dedicate to the project, and their stakeholders have business knowledge and expertise in specific areas. All of these factors need to be considered to determine the optimal sequence of conducting elicitation activities. There are a number of strategies the business analyst may consider when determining which areas of requirement elicitation to address first. So this is the sequencing we are trying to create. What should we do first? Suggested areas of focus are when there are significant amounts of business value to be gained. Naturally, more business value, more priority. When there are greater risks, more uncertainty. Many project unknowns and uncertainties. Again, the scope is not very clear, risks is high, and uncertainty is high. Significant technical challenges. Dependencies on other components or interfaces. And required third-party resources that a project is dependent upon. And limited number of resources are a risk that a key resource may leave the project or company. So you must do the risk analysis as well. Other constraints that affect elicitation sequencing are the dates key stakeholders impose to the project. For example, plant shutdown or seasonal constraint where stakeholders are committed to the operational work of the business before the work of the project. So priority is always given to the business. Project may wait. Collaboration point here is when we are deciding the order of business analysis activities, the project manager and business analyst should work together to determine how the resource availability will impact sequencing decisions. Okay. Then is plan for analysis. First you have elicited the requirements. First you have collected the requirements. Now is the time after you have collected the information, you plan for that first, and now you are planning for how to analyze the data we have gathered. Planning for analysis occurs at a high level in much the same manner as elicitation planning. The business analyst will begin to think about which analysis techniques will be used best suited to meet the stakeholder and project needs, although it is not necessary to call out for each and every analysis technique that may be used. The business analyst should start to think about how the analysis work will be performed and determine the tools, templates, or training that needs to be acquired prior to the start of the actual work. There are a number of analysis techniques to choose from. For each technique has its own strengths and circumstances where each is best used. All the planning process stage, the business analyst does not have sufficient information to know all of the analysis techniques that will be used, since it is unknown to what type of information the elicitation activities will produce. At the planning stage, the business analyst is just starting to think about how to approach the analysis activities, and much of what considered may change in the elicitation activities proceed. Planning for analysis is iterative and occurs throughout the project. So planning is something which we have to do necessarily, and it is continuous in nature. There is a number of analysis techniques to choose from, and each technique has its own strengths and circumstances where each is best used. At the planning stage, the business analyst does not have sufficient information to know all of the analysis techniques that will be used. Since it is unknown as to what type of information the elicitation activities will produce, at the planning stage, the business analyst is just starting to think about how to approach the analysis activities, and much to what is considered here may change as the elicitation activities proceed. Process and analysis is iterative and occurs throughout the life of the project. Define the requirement prioritization process. Once you have collected the requirement, you will group these requirements according to the stakeholders or according to the level of priority for each activity. Because level of priority would mean that the most beneficial proposal, most beneficial project will be brought in on top priority. And in order of priority, this list will be created. When building the business analysis plan, the business analyst should include an explanation as to how prioritization will be conducted for the project. Some common factors to consider when defining the prioritization process are: when requirement prioritization will occur. Will you be doing as soon as you started dealing with the opponents or the customers, or you have your own priority for that? The likelihood that priorities will change. Stakeholder who will be involved in the prioritization process. Data that will be used will be used to prioritize, and stakeholders who will approve the prioritization group. The project lifecycle influences the prioritization process and also dictates the frequency, timing, techniques for performing prioritization. For example, adaptive lifecycle use prioritization techniques for each iteration in order to determine the features to be provided in the next release of the project. Projects using a predictive or waterfall lifecycle will conduct prioritization upfront before product construction begin. Priorities may still in a waterfall project, waterfall motorcycle life cycle will conduct provisional upfront from front behavior product construction begins. Priorities may still shift in the waterfall project, but incorporating such changes is more difficult than a project. In addition to defining the time and frequency of prioritization, the business analyst should also define the criteria that will be used to prioritize requirements. Requirements are prioritized based on number of factors such as value. Does it add any value to our system? How much is it costing? How much level of difficulty is there? How much regulation is there from the top bosses? And what are the risks involved? So these are the few questions you will have to ask when you are doing this analysis. Risk is implementing high-level requirements for the next early phase. Some common techniques are some common techniques for determining priority are Moscow, multi-voting, time boxing, and weighted ranking. For information about conducting the prioritization process, see section 4 on analysis where Moscow is used. Multi-voting, time boxing. So you can consult these sections which are as listed here and read it with your own eyes. Need assessment for more information about the weighted rank matrix and weighted ranking method is applied. Business analysis. Type of typical traceability decisions business analyst should consider are type of the requirement to be traced, lead and detail to trace to, relationship will be re-established and maintained, relationship attributes to be backed, requirement aims that due to requirement life cycle, for example, power doctor, whatever. So to ensure the traceability approach is frequently sized for the project, the value of the process should be compared against the time and cost required to establish and support it. Risk should also be analyzed to ensure additional risks are not, additional risks you can introduce, but they are not introduced by proposing like a traceability process that increases the likelihood of managing the requirements of the final product. So here we talked about the type of traceability decision. Collaboration point, the right amount of traceability helps to reduce project risk, but too much traceability works against the project team and incurs cost. And suppose schedule impact, unnecessary, the project team has an opportunity to charcoal uh, just a minute. Okay, so we were talking about the collaboration point. Right amount of traceability helps to reduce project risk. But too much traceability works against the project and incurs more cost and schedule impacts is unnecessary. The project team has an opportunity to collaborate and define a traceability approach that is suitable for the decision for the needs of the project. Business analysts should not define the traceability approach independently, as decisions at traceability are very important to project. Factors that just okay. Business analysis should not define the traceability approach independently, as decisions at traceability on traceability are very interrelated to work factors, and the project manager is responsible for managing. Define the communication approach. What is the media you want to use? What is the mechanism you want to use for passing on the information about these requirements which you have elicited? G?
So, so this is all what we are doing for the business analysis. What I recall is that we are also doing it for the project management as well.
Yes, of course, we are doing it for the project manager also, because whatever requirements we are gathering, they are ultimately going to impact the project. So, as I said,
So, right,
yes,
sorry, right now I had a feeling that 40% of the project work is being done by the business analyst.
business analysts
Am
will
I right?
have more work during planning. In
Yes.
when the plan is executed, business analyst will just have to follow the plan, because he can't make any changes. Changes as usual move through proper change request.
Okay. All right. I got the point.
Okay, the communication approach describes how business analysis information will be structured and when communication to stakeholders will occur. Approach can be formally documented in the business analysis plan or in a separate business analysis communication plan, if the project or organizational needs required this level of structure or formality. Otherwise, so it will be included in the business analysis plan, but if you want to make it a separate plan, that would be called business analysis communication plan. The business analyst should discuss the communication process with stakeholders to ensure the approach will meet expectations. When defining the business analysis communication, consider the following: type of requirement and requirement related information that will be communicated. So, we must understand that as soon as the requirement is known, it has to be written down somewhere, it has to be communicated to them. Who requires communications and what information they expect? There are many stakeholders. Which communication channels you intend opening? All communication channels will not be open. Only necessary stakeholders will be consulted for that. Stakeholder preferences for receiving information. How does the stakeholder want to see the information you have collected? Maybe he wants to see only the summary figures, or he wants to see more. So whatever he requires, it will be done accordingly. Level of formality required in the communication. Tools including requirement repositories which stakeholders will need access to. So we need to have access to the tools and techniques of business analysis. That must be communicated to them. In addition to gaining agreement on what information will be communicated, the business analyst also receives input about how stakeholders wish to receive information. information on requirements and how often they wish to receive information. What is the frequency? For example, user upper level management may request access only to requirements once the requirements are approved. Subject matter experts may request access to the requirements throughout the project. It may not be available to copy over stakeholder on each communication. Therefore, business analysts may request the business to identify a key stakeholder representative who can serve as the recipient of the requirement related communication. Again, the time zone and physical location of the stakeholder should be considered when defining the communication approach. Location may impose constraints on the communication process as well as the tools selected to support the process. When stakeholders acres, span across multiple time zones, which makes it difficult to have direct contact with the stakeholder, then the communication process may need to be formalized to ensure information is delivered in a clear and concise manner and can be used easily understood when the particular is unavailable. So the collaboration point here is business analysts should not create the community plan independently. Without having all the things integrated, he should not prepare the communication plan. If the business analysis communication plan is formally documented, agreement should be made, or whenever new activities add into the control panel, you will have to kill any one of these many activities. This information will be kept on a sub-plan of including the project managers and the communication plan. Define and manage making process. Throughout the business analysis work process, there are a number of decisions that need to be made before work can commence. So decision making process is already in place. If documented within the business analysis plan, so the team has a point of reference and from where the work begins. Business analyst facilitates agreement and clears up analysis activity. A thorough understanding of the types of decisions that structures will be required to make as an assessment of the authority level in the process will save tremendous time and confusion. The following information can be considered when defining the decision-making process. Type of decisions will be made, including low requirement, how requirements will be approved. So whenever there is a connection period and you have to kind of copy someone else's task, then probably this might be an issue. Following information can be considered when defining the project decision about the product. The following information can be considered. Types of decisions that we are making, including the low, how requirements will be approved, roles of the regulation authority levels, for example, who is involved in the discussion, who will make the decision, etc. Process to follow when consensus can't be reached and requirement related issues need to be escalated. Required turnaround time for decision to be reached. How decisions are documented and communicated, including requirement sign-offs and special data and technique that may be used to help teams evaluate before, for example, each analysis, decision making or decision tree. Throughout the business analysis process, there is a number of decisions that need to be made before you can commence. The decision analysis process should be defined clearly with reference to context to be agile. When there are differences regarding how decisions will be made, uh, okay, the business analyst facilitates agreement and clears up conflicting viewpoint due to the execution of the business. Business analyst facilitates agreements and only also upcoming conflicting viewpoints prior to the escalation of business analysis task. A thorough understanding of the type of decision that stakeholders will be making is essentially necessary. Following information can be considered when defining the decision-making process. Types of decisions that are in hand, and there should not be so many. Roles and authority levels. For example, who is involved in discussion and who make decisions. Process to know when consensus cannot be reached or requirement relates issue not to be escalated. Required turnaround time for a decision or whatever the product is, it has to be reached. How decisions are documented and communicated, including the requirements to sign off. Special thanks for our special tools and techniques that may be used to help teams evaluate alternatives, for example, decision analysis, decision making, etc. Then to define the verification and validation process. You have sequenced it, now you are able to make the decisions, you have made the decisions, and ultimately now you have to check the work. You first have to verify all things are present, and then you have to validate that if they are present, how well they are performing. Business analysis activities that often confuse stakeholders are requirements verification and requirement validation. According to PMBOK 5th guide, verification is to evaluate or whether or not a product, service or system complies with the system. Validation is assurance that a product, service or system meets the needs of the customer and other identified stakeholders. Requirements are associated. Requirement models are both verified and validated. And I hope you understand how we used verification and validation in our project. The only difference is that here we are talking about the business analysis processes. Otherwise, the main concept of verification and validation is the same. In business analysis requirements, verification is the process of reviewing requirements and models to ensure they meet quality standards. Verification is performed to ensure that requirements are constructed properly and models are clear enough to be used effectively. Verification activities ensure that the right protocol will be built. Verification can be conducted iteratively as requirements are in development. All requirement types should be verified. For example, business requirements, stakeholder requirements, solution and solution requirements. Just give me a minute.
Sure.
Okay, during business analysis planning, the business analyst defines how verification and validation activities. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
There is something wrong at my end, and okay, let me bring the screen back again.
I can see the screen.
Okay. Okay, we were talking about during business analysis planning, business analyst defines how verification and validation activities will be conducted. So he has to design, business analyst has to define how we will verify the requirements and how they will be validated. So all the verification and validation activities will be conducted by the business analyst. Stakeholders often have expectations about how they want to review the requirements, and therefore their input should be taken into consideration when defining these processes. Organizations may already have documented standards that identify the characteristics of good requirements. Quality standards should also be defined in planning so they are known prior to the requirement development and verification activities. Verification processes often leverage checklists to define the quality attributes. Now it is talking about the same thing. Verification is the quality assurance. Sorry, verification is the quality control. And once you have checked all the requirements that they are according to the quality, then you can move on for validation that yes, it has been accepted, and it has been this requirement has been accepted by the stakeholder. First you check the quality attributes of that requirement. So all those activities which are doing that would be the verification, and then when they are accepted by the stakeholders, that becomes the validation activity, and that validates the requirement. When a checklist will be leveraged for the verification process, the business analyst ensures that a checklist is created before the verification activities begin. Requirement validation and verification and the characteristics for quality requirements are further discussed in Chapter 4, that is the requirement elicitation and analysis, which deals specifically with the requirement elicitation and analysis. Here we are not going into the detail. Here we are just outlining the steps. Project life cycle has to be created. We have to develop a plan for doing this. And these steps, there are about 15 steps we are discussing here. Next is define the requirements change process. How the changes in the requirements will take place. The requirement traceability metrics you are very well aware of, that would come into play. Requirement change process is performed differently depending on the selected project life cycle. For a project following a predictive life cycle, the project team may use a formal change control process, whereas a project following adaptive life cycle may not. Because in adaptive life cycle, our iterations are so small that we will be applying the correction on retrospectives. Adaptive approaches expect that requirements will evolve over time and as a result often take a flexible approach to requirements change control. So we are keeping the requirements open. We are only restricting the 2-week work, the job which has to be done in one sprint. We are just locking that. Therefore, the requirement change control is open. We can change anything, anytime, anywhere except the 2-week portion. So here we have got more flexibility. For projects that use a formal change control process, that they are the predictive life cycle, the business analyst should consider documenting the approaches so that stakeholders know how to request a change and how changes will be assessed for impact. Changes to requirements may involve a change in scope, a restated business objective, or addition or deletion of features to the product or service being developed. Therefore, the business analyst will need to determine how requirement documentation should be updated once a change is approved. So this is only for predictive life cycle, where we already know what to do and we are fixing the plan, the whole plan, and we only allow changes to the requirement through proper change control mechanism. Whereas I said earlier in the first para that adaptive life cycle encourages or grooms the change, and therefore there is no need for formal change request because we have not locked everything. We just locked one iteration, one sprint. Consider the following types of information when defining a requirement change control process, and that is for predictive cycle, how requirement change will be proposed, who can propose and how he can propose, how changes will be reviewed, who will review them, how change management decisions will be documented, how requirement changes will be communicated, and how changes to requirements, models, traceability, and other requirement related information will be completed and made available once a change is approved. Business analyst also needs to ensure the project team understands the roles and responsibilities for requirement change process. For example, who is responsible for proposing the change? Who is responsible for conducting the assessment? Who is responsible for participating in the change discussion? Who is responsible for approving the changes? So all this must be defined. When there is an approved change request, form or impact analysis template, that should be used. This information should be included when defining the requirement change process. For information on conducting the change control process, we will be talking about it in the traceability and monitoring chapter. So from this point of view, yes.
So what I feel right now is that this is the only what we say we are making the documentation for the change management, right?
Yes.
What I feel right now is that the business analysis during the business analysis or requirement elicitation, there are no change requirements taking place because we ourselves in this state of requirement elicitation.
Okay.
All right. So once the requirement is closed, is being signed off, the project schedule is published, and then once it's in the execution phase, then the change requirement can come up and it will go to the process which is defined over here.
Yes, of course. We are defining it for the future. During the life of the project, those changes will come. And once the
All
change,
right. So my
we are defining how those changes will be treated.
all right. So my question is that why we are defining it over here? It should be done by the project manager. See,
Of course it is.
what I'm arguing right now that it has nothing to do with the business analyst, right?
Okay. Business analysts have to do everything with the requirement because the requirements is the business analyst baby, especially the
Okay.
product requirements. Product requirements are specifically the business of the business analyst. Project manager will deal with those requirements which are the work related requirements, which business
Okay.
analyst does not know. You know, when you
Okay.
are trying to do a job, then how will you do it? How the process of working will change? This is what is the subject of project manager. Business and we are splitting the duties of requirements between the business analyst and the project manager. The work requirements are further detailed and that we are leaving it for the project manager. But as far as the product requirements are concerned, we are detailing them exactly by the business analyst, and we are not only doing uh, that, we are also doing the traceability. The traceability and monitoring will also be done, and that would be done while the project is happening. But we are planning here. So the whole, you see, the one process collect requirements, which is done by project manager, is now opened up by business analyst for the whole project. Throughout the life of the project, these business requirements will have to be managed. So this is to be defined and planned in the business analysis plan.
Okay, sir.
So the collaboration point here is the requirement change control process may be documented by the project manager, as you said, in the change management plan. When there is a need to formally document the process, the business analyst and project manager should work together to determine who takes ownership for documenting the plan and whether the business analysis plan or change management plan is the source for this information. That will take input from these things. Project manager's effort, he will take input from the business analysis plan and the change management plan. So project manager will further elaborate from the point of view of the work. Then is once you have done that, traced it also, then the last part of the plan is to define the solution evaluation process. Defining the solution evaluation process identifies how a solution is evaluated during the evaluation phase, which activities will be performed, what techniques will be applied, and how information will be analyzed. Through evaluation, the business analyst determines whether a solution has achieved the desired business result. Evaluation is, we are defining here how would we know at the end whether business analyst has met his objectives or not. All the requirements have been met or not. This is to be done through an evaluation process. Evaluation is performed before and after a solution is implemented. When evaluation is conducted after a solution is implemented, new or changed requirements may be identified, which can lead to refinement of the solution or can generate new projects from the purpose of creating a new version of the product. Project lifecycle influences the timing and frequency of the evaluation activities. So expected benefits for the product or solution were defined in the business case. The work is in planning is to determine how to measure these benefits. Solution evaluation planning involves defining evaluation criteria and acceptance levels, qualitative and quantitative evaluation activities, how the solution will be evaluated, when and how often the evaluation will be performed. Will it be done in the beginning, in the end, in the middle, or whatever? Whenever you want this evaluation process to happen, you define that when and how. Evaluation techniques that will be used, for example, how would you evaluate? You will go to the focus groups, you will observe, you will survey, you will interview, or whatever. Whether any special measurement tools will be required and how results will be analyzed and reported. For more information on conducting the evaluation process, we will talk about it in the last chapter, solution evaluation. Then is the plan, the business analysis work. So this is 3.5. This is the next topic. We can take it on tomorrow. So should I leave here?
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. No problem.
Okay. I think we are left with about 20 slides for tomorrow. We'll do those 20 slides tomorrow and we'll finish this chapter. Right? Any questions?
No, sir. Not so far.
Okay, then let's call it a day. Thank you very much for joining and see you tomorrow. Take care.